Hi, I'm Lillian. Welcome back to my channel, Income Pages. Today I'm going to be doing a book haul. I have 10 books to talk about, and these are all the ones I've bought since my last book haul video at the end of April. Starting off with How to Kill Your Family by Bella Mackie. This is a, what genre? I count this as like crime, mystery, thriller, but I know that's three completely different genres for other people. I'm going to say it's a thriller, but not in the way you might think. So this is about a woman called Grace, who has killed 6 members of her family, yet she is in prison for a crime she did not commit. I had my eye on this for ages before finally buying it. I think I must have seen it in a Foyles or a Waterstones, like when it was just newly released and it was this massive hardback book. I don't like buying brand new massive hardback books because they're all like £25, and I know if I just give it a bit I can get it in a nice paperback. Speaking of nice paperbacks, I really love this colour. Did I buy this just because it was pink? No. But did it help? Yes. However, I'm not a fan, unpopular opinion, I'm not a fan of sprayed edges. I don't like them and I don't care. I have already read this and I had a really good time reading it for the most part. There were some aspects I did not vibe with and I thought was an interesting, aka dumb choice, but mostly I had a really good time with this and would recommend it. When I finally bought this though, I actually got it on the Isle of Wight in the Newport Waterstones, along with book number 2, which is The Odyssey, obviously by Homer, but this is the translation by Emily Wilson. This is like quite a big deal because I think this is the first translation that's ever been done by a woman. Only took, what, 2,500 years? I really like the story of the Odyssey. I've really loved mythology and folklore and legends and all that kind of stuff since I was very little. But in my final year of university, I did a module which was all about retellings and reimaginings of the Odyssey. And I don't think it's an overstatement to say that it was probably my favorite thing I ever studied. I just loved it. It was so interesting. And so the version of the Odyssey that I bought for that class, I can't remember if it was like the official recommended text or if it was just, you know, the one I ended up buying. But it is the Robert Fagles translation, which I think was done in like the 50s. But I remember the professor at the time saying that this had either just come out, this translation, or it was just about to. And ever since then, like 4 years ago, I've been like, oh, I must pick up the Emily Wilson translation. And I finally have. It's a very nice copy. It's got like French flaps. I love a French flap. I'd love it more if there was like, you know, a map of Ithaca and the Aegean Sea and stuff in there. But you know what, I'll take a French flap either way. But I've already added this to my mythology and folklore shelf. That's that one. Have I read it yet? No. But I view that shelf as more of like a reference library. I'm not buying books there to necessarily read them immediately, just to have them, I guess. So yeah, I haven't read this one yet, but I flipped through it slightly and like, let's do a little comparison of the translations. So let me get, here we are. So this is the Robert Fagles translation. This one opens, the first line of the story is, "Sing to me of the man, muse, the man of twists and turns, driven time and again off course, once he had plundered the hallowed heights of Troy." Now let's compare with Emily Wilson. Her first line, oh, there is a map. Just found a map, very nice. Oh, there's 2 pages of maps. There's there's 4 double pages of maps. Okay, very nice. Okay, her first line is, "Tell me about a complicated man. Muse, tell me how he wandered and was lost when he had wrecked the holy town of Troy." So I think I just didn't realize like how much scope for variety there is within translations of the Odyssey. So yeah, I'm very excited to one day, you know, compare and contrast these 2 versions. Maybe I'll branch out and buy a third one, who knows. The next 2 books I got were Down Among the Sticks and Bones and Beneath the Sugar Sky by Shauna Maguire. These are books 2 and 3 in her Wayward Children novella series. The concept of this series is that it's all about children who have found a magical door into a fantasy world. But the point of this series isn't really to look at their adventures through these doors, but it's more focused on what happens when they come back. Either they are, you know, thrown out of this world they find themselves in, or they accidentally come back to their original world when they didn't really want to. So yeah, it's more focused on what happens afterwards and how these children come to grips with the fact that they are probably never going to go back to this fantasy world that they loved and they felt like they truly belonged there for the first time ever. The first book in this series is Every Hard Doorway, and this one introduces us to Eleanor West's Home for Wayward Children, which is a boarding school basically where these children can go after they've come back from their fantasy worlds and meet people who've had similar experiences to them and finally get some sort of understanding and hopefully closure on what they're going through. So that's what book 1 focuses on. And then book 2, Down Among the Sticks and Bones, actually takes some of the side characters from book 1 and is basically their prequel. And it does tell you all about their adventures in their world they go to. And then book 3 is kind of like back in Eleanor West's school again. And I believe the series follows this alternating pattern all the way through. Although I will say this one starts off at the school and then they quickly, you know, go traveling and it doesn't stay there for long, which was a bit, I didn't really like this book, partially for that reason. But yeah, I believe that then book 4 is going to be someone else's story in their world. Book 5 is going back in school, you know, etc, etc. I think there are like 7 books in this series now, and I get the impression that one's going to come out every year for the foreseeable future. So yeah. The next book I bought was The Thousand Autumns of Jacob de Zoet. Don't know how you say that. By David Mitchell. David Mitchell is he's accidentally become an auto-buy author for me, which was a concept that I always was like, oh no, I don't think there is anyone whose books I would automatically buy. The closest other example I could think of is V.E. Schwab, but there are just several of her books that I'm really not that interested in, like I think her earlier books, and then The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, really not interested in reading that one. So I was thinking like, oh, there's no one who I would, you know, automatically buy a book from without really knowing what it was about. And then I bought this and I was like, no, I think David Mitchell is my first ever official auto-buy author. Having said that, this is definitely not a new release from him, and I haven't even bought all of his books, but I'm getting there. But I believe this book is about Jacob, who I want to say is Dutch. Yes, here we are. A young Dutch clerk, and I think he travels to Japan in the 18th. Oh, I should have looked up what this was about. In the 18th century. There we are. I don't know much about Japanese history, but I believe that was in the period where they were very sort of isolationist and didn't let many people leave or come in. So I think trade was very restricted. So I don't know what that means for our buddy Jacob here, or exactly what this book is about. I really like David Mitchell books because they're a weird mixture. My favorite ones from him have been a weird mixture of sci-fi and fantasy. This one sounds more like straight up historical fiction. So I'm hoping it has some weird elements in. I can probably trust that it does, just knowing what I've read from David Mitchell before. But you know what, even if this does end up being just straight historical fiction, I still think I'm gonna have a good time with him. I have to date only disliked one of his books. So this is going on the TBR shelf. I have no immediate plans to read this. And actually it might be like some of his other books where they languished up there for like 5+ years before I finally picked them up. Hopefully this won't, but who's to say? The next 4 books I got for my birthday this year, which was in August. First of all, we have The Gilded Wolves by Roshni Chokshi. This surprised me because this is really not the book cover I thought it was. I was picturing this. Obviously, this is what I got. I think this is like the new paperback edition. I don't know. But this is set in France, as by the Eiffel Tower on it. It is historical fantasy. Here we are, Paris, 1889, it says on the back. I have heard this compared in some ways unfairly to The Six of Crows duology, in that I believe it is sort of a fantasy heist with, you know, a cast of characters that come to be a bit like a found family. I'm pretty sure that's where the comparisons end, but like people do love to compare things to Six of Crows. Having said that, that's kind of why I was interested in this, because people said it was like Six of Crows. And I have read a short story by this author, and it was one of the standouts. What was it from? It was in, I think, 1,000 Beginnings and Endings, which was an anthology of stories all inspired by or based on Asian mythology. And I didn't love quite a lot of the stories in there, but Roshni Chokshi's story I read was one of my favorites. So I was like, oh, interesting. Let me see what else I can read from her. And then I discovered that she had written a trilogy of books that people had compared to Six of Crows. And I was like, okay, I'm sold. I only asked for the first book from my birthday. Obviously there's 2 more because it's a trilogy, because I don't like to buy whole series without having read them. I'll read the first book in a series. If I like it, I'll get the second one. If I like that, I'll get the third one, etc, etc. But I am actually very excited to read this. Next, I finally got a copy of Convenience Store Women by Sayaka Murata. This was a surprise kind of favourite book from, oh, not last year, from the year before, from 2020. This is about a woman who works in a convenience store, and she really likes it there. Even though people sort of look down on her, like I found it, they're like, why aren't you doing anything with your life? Why aren't you doing anything more impressive? Why aren't you married? All this kind of stuff. Where she's perfectly happy. You know, she likes the comfort and the routine and the environment of her job, and she doesn't really want to change it. And I've been wanting to get a physical copy of this ever since I read it 2 years ago, and I finally got one. I was originally looking for it in pink. This is purple. It's close enough. I'm adding it to my shelves and I'm very happy. Next on my birthday is another David Mitchell book. This one is Black Swan Green. This one, again, I don't know much about. I believe it is about a 13-year-old boy with a stammer, and it's sort of like a year of his life. And I've heard that it's also semi-autobiographical. So again, I'm hoping it has some weirder sci-fi / fantasy elements in, but again, even if it doesn't, I'll probably end up having a very good time. Now that I've got this one, as well as Thousand Autumns of Jacob de Zoet, I only have one more book of his to buy, which is his most recent one. I think it's called Utopia Avenue. So yeah, if I can get that one, I will have every single David Mitchell book on my shelves. And this book has a sort of dubious honour of being the only yellow book I own. It's sort of a very greeny yellow, but yeah, fun fact, it's the only yellow book I own. And finally, for my birthday, I got A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. This is a very short sci-fi novella set far in the future, where one day all of the robots gain sentience and were like, thanks, but no thanks, we're gonna go and live in the woods. And since that day, no one has seen a robot. So it's now like hundreds or thousands of years later, and we sort of know they're out there somewhere, but we have not seen them. They're almost like mythological creatures at this point. And then one day, a tea monk meets a robot. I have already read this and I really liked it because it is science fiction that's not depressing, which is actually quite hard to come by. And I have one final book to talk about, which I'm going to say, interestingly, I bought on the other end of the country. So How to Kill Your Family and that new translation of the Odyssey I bought on the Isle of Wight, which is pretty much as far south in the UK as you can get. This next book I bought in Scotland. Not, you know, the Outer Hebrides or anything, but like quite far north for a Londoner. I bought this in a charity shop in Dunoon, and it is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I have heard very mixed things about this. This is about a woman who finds herself in the Midnight Library, and it's sort of where she can see different versions of her life as she'd like made one tiny choice. I don't know any examples, but I'm imagining it's something like, oh, what would have happened if I went to university to study this other thing? Or what would have happened if I broke up with this guy? Or, you know, stuff like that. And she can see the different paths her life might have taken. And I've heard some people say that this is amazing, inspirational, it makes you appreciate life, and it's, you know, it's full of hope and that kind of stuff. And I've heard other people say that it's, you know, cheesy, try hard, very annoying, like faux inspirational nonsense. So I'm interested to see where I land on that. I have read 3 of Matt Haig's other books. I read The Humans, which I loved. I read How to Stay Alive, which was good. And then I read How to Stop Time, which I really didn't like. So I feel like I've already sort of been through the spectrum with his books. So yeah, who knows where this will be. When we bought this in the charity shop, the woman on the till said that, oh yeah, that book. And then she said that apparently it keeps like coming back. I don't know if she meant, you know, lots of people have been donating their copies, and so it seems like there's always a copy of this in the charity shop. I like to think that she was talking about this specific book, and like someone bought it, read it, and then donated it back to the same shop, and then someone else bought it and then donated it back to the same shop, because that's just quite a funny idea to me. But if I do end up disliking this and wanting to get rid of it again, it's not going to end up back in Dunoon. So I think we've finally broken that cycle. But yes, that is the 10th book. So yeah, those are the 10 books I got. I also now have a tiny little unhaul of, I think, 8 books. I mean, I don't have much to say about these because there's a reason I'm getting rid of them. But first of all, we have Eat, Sweat, Play by Anna Kessel. I bought this like 6 years ago, I want to say, because it was big on BookTube in like 2017. It is about women in sports. I think this is an important topic. However, I hate sports. and I've just never wanted to read this book, which I could feel bad about, or I could not, and I could just give it to someone else, which is what I'm gonna do. Next is A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing by Emma McBride. I tried to read this year. I read 10 to 12 pages and was like, nope, not for me, which, fun fact, is exactly what my sister said when I told her I'd bought this. I feel like I've told that story before in my previous book haul. So yeah, this has a very, very short life on my shelves, but it's not for me, and it's probably gonna go back to a charity shop. Next are 3 blue children's books, which I think I've owned for, I don't know, 15 years at this point, and I'm not going to read them again. It's time to pass them on. So we have I Am David by Unhaul. This is about a boy who escapes from a concentration camp. I actually first heard this because I think they did like a radio adaptation. I don't really listen to the radio, and I listened to the radio even less when I was like 8 years old, but somehow I heard the radio adaptation of this and ended up getting the book, and I did like it. But, you know, it's a kid's book and I don't want to read it again. In a similar vibe, we have The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, which is also about a boy and a concentration camp. And again, I'm just not gonna read it. I actually forgot I owned these 2 books, which is maybe a sign that it's time to get rid of them. And finally, we have this book. I've lost the dust jacket from ages ago, but it's called Centuries of Stories. This must have been published like around 2000, because I think the idea is that there is a short story in here from tons of different authors. I couldn't tell you any of them, but I know that Jacqueline Wilson had a story in here. And each of the stories is set in a different century. So I think there's 20 stories in here, each set in a different century. It's fine, it's a kid's book. I forgot I owned it, I'm not gonna read it. Same again. And then we have a few books that I read/tried to read this year and really didn't end up enjoying. First of all, we have this gorgeous book, Trouble the Saints by Leah Dawn Johnson, which I tried my hardest to get into and to read, and I just did not get on with it. I felt this really big disconnect between me and the main character, and whenever she did anything, I was like, why are you doing that? I don't get it. What are you doing? I don't know why you're doing anything you're doing. This is a book set in 1940s New York. It's about gangsters, and it is about a woman with a sort of supernatural ability to throw knives. That sounds so cool. This book was really boring. And then a third of the way through, it changed perspectives to, I shit you not, the only character I was less interested in than our main character, Phyllis. And at that point I was like, I need to give up. I need to give up on this book. So even though it's beautiful, and even though I had such high hopes for it, I'm getting rid of it, obviously. The final 2 books I have to talk about, and why I'm getting rid of them, are, I guess, kind of spoilers for my next wrap up. Because obviously I really didn't like them. They are The Sanatorium by Sarah Pierce and Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. We'll start with The Sanatorium. This is a thriller, which I bought because it had a very similar sounding premise to the book One by One by Ruth Ware, which I read earlier this year and really, really enjoyed. This is also set in a snowy, isolated setting on the Alps. There is a detective who is invited to her estranged brother's engagement party, but then his fiance goes missing. Dun dun dun. And unlike One by One, I thought this was objectively actually really shit. It was a mess, it was a muddle, it was very compelling, I'll give it that, because I did keep reading it till the end and I didn't give up, and I was really, really hoping until the very last page that there would be this reveal, which I thought of halfway through, and I thought, oh my god, it's gonna be this, what a cool reveal. It was not, it was really awful. Yeah, no. Also got these piss-coloured sprayed edges. No thank you. And then Ariadne by Jennifer Saint is my least favourite book I've read this year. It is a retelling of the story of Ariadne from Greek mythology. Ariadne is, okay, so you know the story of Theseus and the Minotaur, and he goes into the labyrinth and he kills the Minotaur. Ariadne is kind of, you know, the brains behind the operation. She's the one who actually gives him the tools in order to complete this and to kill the Minotaur and to escape afterwards from the labyrinth. And then he thanks her by sailing away with her and the people he's rescued, and then he leaves her on an island and fucks off again. So this is meant to be a retelling of Ariadne's story, because obviously that's not all there is to it. There's a lot more to her, supposedly, and that's what I was hoping for. And I will just say that the more I think about this book, the more I hate it. So those are the 10 books I've added to my shelves since the end of April, and the 8 I'm throwing off my shelves again. So I've had a net gain of 2 books in the last couple of months. If you would like to, please let me know what the most recent book you bought was, and or the most recent book you got rid of. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one.